My plan is to hide, to avoid, but if I get busted, if I get captured, I'm not going to do a Rambo, I'm going to do a Gandhi. If I get captured, I'm not going to do a Rambo, I'm going to do a Gandhi. If I get captured, I'm not going to do a Rambo, I'm going to do a Gandhi.
If I get captured, I'm not going to do a Rambo, I'm going to do a Gandhi. You just heard it from his own mouth, and yet the prosecution doesn't allow certain exculpatory evidence to be played before the jury. We've got this right here. This is his address. We're talking about Schaeffer Cox here, an innocent man in prison. We will never shut up about his innocence, and we will continue to make noise and shine light. My wife tells me that Ray Southwell has put out a new article. If I can find, there we go. Ray Southwell in Alaska has put out a new article about Schaeffer Cox. He just did one yesterday, number 10. He did another one, number 11, today. And so we're going to read that into YouTube, but we're going to get it into YouTube. And I suspect it's going to be more about this man right here. He's a United States Department of Justice prosecutor named Joseph W. Bottini. He is one wicked man. He spends Federal Reserve money to put innocent men in prison and to advance his own career. He is on a fast train to hell. And let's read Ray Southwell's article. All right, let's see if I got it at the right. Maybe I can go 200. Yeah, that might work. All right, here we go. In support of Schaeffer Cox, number 11, May the 28th, 2017, Joseph W. Bottini appealed his 40-day suspension without pay, punishment for his evil behavior in the Ted Stevens case. On April 5th, 2013, the court ruled in his favor, awarding him his back pay. No punishment delivered for withholding critical information that would have supported Senator Ted Stevens' testimony. But who cares about the truth in the Department of Justice? So you can falsely convict a United States senator, and you can perform absolute horrific illegal activities in a federal court, and the slap on the wrist that they give you, which is 40-day suspension, you'll get that money back because they all stick together. The court deciding the discipline to Bottini stated, the Department of Justice made a procedural error. The court's published words are, the suspensions are therefore reversed on the grounds of harmful procedural error. In view of this ruling, I do not address whether the appellants committed the misconduct they were charged with or whether the penalties the agencies tried to impose were reasonable. Pretty cool. Behave like Joseph W. Bottini and get away scot-free. Organized crime presented as simple errors. If Department of Justice is unable to follow simple procedures in disciplining a corrupt attorney, how can we believe any process brought about by the Department of Justice? Is anything dealing with the Department of Justice accurate? For they cannot follow simple procedural discipline. Could they really be that inept? The judge says so. Hogwash. I will post the court's final decision of Bottini's punishment from the Department of Justice in the comment section of this post. No punishment, not a single dime lost by Joseph W. Bottini, for he received back pay during his time off from the Department of Justice. Nothing more than a paid vacation of 40 days. Joseph W. Bottini also filed a counsel fee petition to a governing board called Merit System Protection Board. Last August 12, 2016, this governing board ruled Bottini would also receive money to cover his attorney fees, a total of near $300,000, which was paid by the Department of Justice for his counsel fees. I'm getting more angry as I'm reading this, by the way. Please listen to an attorney explain the board's ruling in the attached link. Starts at the 6-minute mark through about the 10-minute mark. The total awarded amount for legal fees was $650,000. Bottini's attorney fees were near $300,000, and the other Department of Justice attorney fees involved in the corrupt conviction of Ted Stevens were $350,000. I wonder if Ted Stevens was paid by the Department of Justice for his legal fees. It is well documented the Department of Justice attorneys withheld exculpatory evidence in support of Ted Stevens' testimony. Perhaps if Stevens lived long enough, he would have sued Joseph W. Bottini. At least Stevens had deep pockets. The good old boys girls network of attorneys working together as they do in an organized criminal venture, supporting one another all the while making the people pay the cost of their corrupt behavior. My friend Schaeffer Cox rots in prison because he does not have deep pockets and his court-appointed attorney believes everything the Department of Justice spouts out. There is no justice for the people, it is just us. Consider the total dollars we the people paid for the corruption in the Department of Justice. The total dollars spent towards the Ted Stevens corrupt conviction case along with the multiple investigations of the Department of Justice corruption. Then, tying all the money paid for the legal work we the people paid, nothing ever changes in the Department of Justice and the citizens pay and pay again. Evildoers like Joseph W. Bottini laugh all the way to the bank. Assistant United States Attorney Stephen E. Scrocky was publicly presented lead attorney in the conviction of my friend Schaeffer Cox. He was not a novice attorney in the Department of Justice like Nicholas Marsh, for he has been with the Department of Justice since 1991. Joseph W. Bottini was a senior by only 6 years. Scrocky declares to be a senior litigation counsel District of Alaska for the Department of Justice. Who was responsible for the corrupt conviction of my friend Schaeffer Cox? Next time, the discussion of Stephen E. Scrocky, attorney in the Department of Justice, all about his close relationship with evildoer Joseph W. Bottini. Also, Scrocky's desire to become a federal judge and using my friend Schaeffer Cox as a stepping stone for his advancement. For we the people are nothing more than chattel for the rich and powerful, to be used and discarded for their own personal gain. Signed, Ray Southwell. And then he gives a link to this podcast, which goes to Dewey Publications. I have that brought up, and I will play it. But let me just say that as I read this and I find out the depth of these people's evilness, and that my friend Schaeffer Cox is sitting in a jail cell away from his 2 children, and his family has been destroyed, I can't help but get angry. And I pray earnestly, and I pray fervently, and I pray with righteous anger that God kills this man named Joseph W. Bottini, that he just does away with his life. I'm going to play this Dewey Publication starting at the 6-minute mark. I have to mute my microphone. I'll unmute, and we'll close this out once it's finished, but we need to get this on the record.
Question arises, we'll reach it on this podcast, I assure you. And now, agency practitioners, a case that I'm sure would bring joy to your hearts. It's a counsel fee case. The case involved 2 appellants whose cases were joined. Goeke, G-O-E-K-E, and Mr. Goeke, if I pronounced that wrong, I apologize, and Bottini, or Botany, I think it's Bottini, B-O-T-T-I-N-I, and the docket number is CB, like Charlie Bravo, 0752-150228A1. These cases came out of the San Francisco or Western Regional Office. The date of the decision here is August 12, 2016. If I didn't mention it before, by the way, those of you who still remember the discussion of the Emanuel case, that was non-precedential, and this case is also a non-precedential decision. Now, the case involved relatively short suspensions of 2 assistant United States attorneys, the details of which need not detain us here. It's enough to say that both of these gentlemen prevailed in their appeals completely and then filed counsel fee petitions. There were a number of lawyers, and some of the lawyers came from large New York-based but actually international law firms. One of the firms was O'Melveny and Myers, the other Cadwallader, Wickersham, and Taft. These are big law firms, many, many hundreds of attorneys worldwide. And these are commercial law firms. These are not little civil service practitioners like me. The senior litigators and other counsel in these firms bill out at rates that may well exceed $1,000 an hour, maybe $800 an hour. So you can imagine when they start putting time into a board case, it gets right expensive. And so it did here. The counsel fees, as I added them up, and my addition is perhaps not the best, but it's close enough. I would say the counsel fees here were in excess, or about $650,000. Now, that's for 2 suspensions. And the board awarded those fees, and then the Justice Department, unless they try to take this case to the Federal Circuit, which would not seem particularly appealing to the Federal Circuit, because the counsel fees were not criticized as to the amount of hours or the rates that were awarded by the board. Well, that amount of counsel fees is, I think, the largest amount of counsel fees in any reported board decision at the national level. It may be that there's some decision out there from an administrative judge that I haven't seen because it was never the subject of a petition for review that awards more, but I suspect this is pretty unique. And of course, your respondent here is the Justice Department. They got 20,000 lawyers, so I suppose they feel they can just litigate away, and if they litigate long enough, maybe they'll just prevail. But it didn't happen here, so the Justice Department will be $650,000 plus or minus poorer out of its appropriation of many billions of dollars, probably not that much. But it's something to consider, agencies, particularly small agencies, where your appropriated funds may not come close to that of the Justice Department. You have to think about fees. You start getting into these hotly litigated cases, the fees, if there are a bunch of lawyers involved for one firm or a number of firms, can become pretty darn sizable. I think I should raise my hourly rate. What do you think? Now let's switch over to the EEO side for a moment. Give us a little variety here. And the case is Roxanne C. versus appeal number 0120142236.
All right. Well, you heard that. They won their case, and so they got all their money back. I'm telling you, praise God for men like Ray Southwell, that he's exposing this evildoer, Joseph W. Bottini. So we need to always support the men who do the right thing, regardless of the consequences. And thank God that there's still some left in America. And we do need to support Schaeffer Cox. That's his address right there on the screen. I pray you guys write him a letter and let him know that you care about him, you love him, and we have not forgot him. And we are going to fight for him to be released. Take care and God bless.